Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to What Do You Say Anime. I am your host, Peter, and on today's episode, Miles and myself will be discussing deconstruction in anime. It's a fun word that gets tossed around every now and then about specific shows, and there's a lot of preconceived notions about what people think is actually deconstruction in anime, whether it's a specific genre, a scene, a topic, a situation that happens during an anime, and people label it as maybe deconstruction, or is this subversion, is this satire, it's parody. We're going to talk about all of that on today's episode. So let's get to introductions. Miles, you see him in Watch Club. How's it going today, Miles?
It's going great. And Pete, is this the first time we're doing an episode, just the two of us?
I want to say yes. I honestly, now I think about it, yeah, I think this is our first solo, or I should say solo, our first duo. It should be fun. We got a couple topics on hand we're going to talk about, but mostly we wanted to jump in to deconstruction. It's a topic that, or it's a word that gets tossed around. We've seen it when it's describing shows like Neon Genesis Evangelion, Madoka Magica. I've seen it been thrown around with like One Punch Man, stuff like that. So I wanted to jump in and talk about it and what we think deconstruction is, because before we even had this or started this episode, we were in Discord talking, and Kat didn't know really what deconstruction in anime was, and we got a really nice pre-banter conversation, and it's really showed maybe what I interpret as deconstruction and what you consider deconstruction in anime, especially, are two different topics. So, Miles, what do you think deconstruction in anime is? Whether it's a topic or a genre or a scene, what are your thoughts on deconstruction in anime?
Yeah, sure. So, one, I want to give a shout out to Kat. So, my introduction to deconstruction in anime, much like there's some large percentage of the people listening, I'm sure, was through Madoka Magica. So, I watched Madoka Magica. I watched it. I really liked it. I Google all the conversations and stuff. Um, you see the term get thrown around for it, deconstruction, a lot. I didn't really know what that was. Looked into it. It turns out there's this huge debate on if Madoka is even an example of a deconstruction. Um, and so I think it's good, when you hear a term like that and you don't know what it means, be like Cat, just ask what it means, Google what it means, try to figure it out, because I think we just sort of let these things go. You know what I mean? We hear, oh, this is that, and then you apply that to what you know about the show, but you don't necessarily know what the term means, and that's how
Exactly.
we get a
Yes.
term that's as bastardized as deconstruction currently is.
So like in anime, more specifically, it's more to represent the tropes that we see on the screen.
Yeah, so for anything, um, what a deconstruction is in the term that we're using it. There's a literary deconstruction thing that it's a little bit above my head. I'm not like a English lit major or anything, but the way we use it in media, um, like anime specifically in our case, is you have a common trope, um, something that we sort of suspend our disbelief for, that we just accept because of maybe the genre it's in, or because we're watching anime, or if we're reading a comic book or a manga, there are things we just accept, um, like common tropes. The character archetypes, for example, um, you know, uh, that sort of stuff. Like first girl, that's a trope. Um, so what a deconstruction does is thinks about the trope outside of that context, outside of the show that it's in, the genre that it's in, and tries to apply it to reality to make the trope, I guess, more realistic in a way. How would this trope happen in real life? Um, an example you might think about action movies real quick, and people are walking away from explosions, and they're looking super cool,
Cool guys don't look at explosions.
exactly.
They
And so,
strive forward in their diving covered boots. They wear jumpsuits of glittery rhinestones, but don't think about the people you killed.
exactly. And what's the Will Ferrell Marky Mark movie?
Oh, the
Um,
other
the
guys.
other guys, right? So there's the scene where there's the explosion and they get knocked off their feet and are deafened temporarily and just freaking out because of that. So that's sort of a deconstruction. What would it be like if someone was just calmly walking away from a massive explosion in the real world. Um, and, we didn't care about the cinematography, like, that sort of stuff. So that is what a deconstruction is. Um, do we want to talk about what it's not, or do we want to like give some more anime examples of deconstruction? Like, what do you want to do here?
Yeah, I would like to talk about like what we see in anime, and I think like I want to get into like the big buzz shows, like the Neon Genesis, because I think that is probably the most common one that gets tossed around when you think at least when I hear the word deconstruction anime, my mind goes to Neon Genesis, and we can maybe debate it later. It also goes to Madoka Magica, and just what about Neon Genesis is like, why is that always like considered the trophy child of deconstruction for anime? Like, what about it has these deconstructive themes and elements that people gravitate towards?
Sure. So like, Ava's like a really interesting example to me because it gets commonly thrown around as like a deconstruction of mecha anime. Um, and I'm going to admit I don't have a super deep mecha watch basis, So I haven't, especially for anime that are coming out before Evangelion, you know. But I do know that a lot of these things, like these super robot shows and stuff, do emphasize things like the pilots being afraid and like the issues of a child being like thrown into like a warlike scenario. Um, so I don't know if Evangelion is necessarily a deconstruction of mecha anime, but what I do know is that Evangelion has a lot of deconstruction, just of lots of anime tropes. Um, so whereas something where mecha anime might commonly, and that might not be true or not. I know some of the Gundams do it, so like I know that it wasn't unique for Ava
I
at the
think like
time.
the biggest thing behind like Shinji and say other mecha pilots is that a lot of them are like soldiers and they're willing to go into this Gundam or like a Gundam or mecha robot. Like they're fully like aware of the situation at hand, where Shinji is like a scared child. He's thrown into a situation where he has no knowledge of, and that's kind of like where like you always view like the guy who's piloting Gundam Unit 1 or something like that. He is the hero. He is the main character. He is the savior of the land, where Shinji is like just this scared teenager, and he's
Yeah.
not really wanting to be that person.
So the difference, like, so like, say someone was like, you're not Shinji wouldn't be deconstructing, um, like a soldier who was that, right? Because he's not. So it's not looking at that trope
Yeah,
realistically.
for sure.
It would be looking at something where, um, like a child is randomly like a chosen one kind of thing. There's a chosen one element in Evangelion.
Yes.
I don't think that is necessarily common to mecha anime. It might be. Comment below if you know a lot about mecha anime and you want
Unless
to
you
talk
consider
more.
Attack on Titan a mecha.
Um, well, that has some chosen one aspects to it as well. Um, but the the stuff that like Evangelion deconstructs are like the Dere archetypes. Um, so Asuka I think is a great example of a like a tsundere deconstruction. So you have tsunderes, right? They're angry, they berate you. Um, they're asking if you can practice kissing with them, and then the next moment they're calling you Baka Senji and punching you in the face. Um, so uh, Ava like goes into the psyche of a character like that. It doesn't just say this is an archetype of a character we have. It examines why someone would end up like that, right? And so you have Asuka um, being examined. She has a horrible, dark past. Her mother killed herself. She has hangups about if her father like loved her. She has this extreme innate desire to prove herself. She thinks working together is like a sign of weakness. Um, any show of meekness or anything like that, like Shinji has, she views as, you know, pathetic, to quote her. more so than, just the way someone is. Rei, right? You have the Kudere type, very quiet, submissive sort of person. Like, what makes someone so much like that, right? To the exaggerated degree that these Dere archetypes are. Um, she's a real doll. She's a
Literally,
clone.
yes, yes.
Yes, like, right? Like, she was programmed to be like that, to be submissive, to follow orders. Um, it really goes into what, you know, in the mind of Anno would need to happen um for these things to come true, to be possible in the real world. Um, you know, just one quick other Ava thing. The accidental groping scene in Ava is like one of my favorite scenes in it. So, the accidental groping scene is usually a trope that's played for laughs in anime, like
Oops,
the
I
male
fell over.
character,
Yeah.
yeah, like falls over, accidentally grabs a girl's boobs or whatever, and then it's like, oh no, and like it's this whole to do, where the girl is like, you meant to like fall over, and it's like, this whole comedic bit. It can be funny sometimes. I remember specifically it was kind of funny, and if her flag breaks, there was like a good scene with it.
Shit, it's the entire plot of Yamada-kun and the Seven Witches.
Yeah. But in Evangelion, right, Shinji falls on Rei, and like they actually fall. She treats it like he tripped. It's awkward and weird, just like it could be in real life, where someone isn't assuming that you're doing the trope in real life, right? Like they think you fell and then your hand just happened to land on their breast, but like, you're naked, please get off me. Like, I need to get my clothes
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Um, so like that I think is very uh like another example of deconstruction where it's just applying to like a trope in general and not specifically like a genre, you know? But Evangelion has a lot of it, and it uses it. And this is an important point of deconstruction. Deconstruction, for the sake of deconstruction, isn't super deep. It's one of many tools you can use to help enhance your themes and things like that. So, in a
That's
show like
a really
Ava,
good point, because I think a lot of people consider like deconstruction as like this deep, like literary like element that writers use to like express a point, when really it's not really as deep as people think it is. It's just like a tool that they use, something just like like writing a comedy trope or something like that.
yeah, like it does. It's not inherently deep, right? Like it adds depth to stuff if you have something to say. Um, like Evangelion is a lot about like what it means to find your identity in life, and uh, despite the hardships of life, is like okay to go on. Like, should you continue life, despite the fact that it's hard and difficult and painful? Like, these are the questions Evangelion asks, and by deconstructing tropes like the Tsundere, you're able to have these more fleshed out characters who have trauma and can be used in other ways to help ask these questions. So like that's great, but like um it doesn't need to be deep to enhance a story.
Yeah.
A deconstruction doesn't mean that it's deep. The groping scene isn't deep, right? It's just used to show Rei's character, right?
Yes.
It
Yeah.
takes a trope, it plays it a different way by showing it how it would happen like in real life, to sort of demonstrate Rei in a way. So
Yeah.
like it's a tool like symbolism or juxtaposition or anything like that that helps enhance the show, but it doesn't mean it's deep. Another thing that I think people conflate with deconstruction is that like it means it's like darker or like edgier and stuff. And I think a lot of this comes both from Ava and Monica, because they're commonly used examples, and they're both a little darker than their I guess like the idea of the shows and their genre,
Yeah.
right? So, but that doesn't necessarily mean something is deconstructive. And
Yep.
for something to be deconstructive, it doesn't need to be darker. So, as Pete is well aware, because I will never shut up about it, one of my favorite series is the When They Cry series. So the first entry in that is Higurashi. It's a pretty popular anime, so I'm sure some of you have seen it. Spoiler alerts going ahead if you haven't, but it starts off, it's like a very slice of life, almost K-On!-esque show, right? Like a guy moves to a small town and he does club activities with his friends, like that's what the show is about for like 3 episodes. And there's some like hints that like some stuff is going on. And like episode 4 it becomes like a murder fest. Lots of people die. It's very gory and bloody, and it's just like a complete subversion of your expectations.
It's a good time.
Yeah, the show's so good. But that doesn't mean that the show is a deconstruction. It's not like a deconstruction of slice of life. It's not a deconstruction of like school things or anything like that. It's a show that has those elements that's just darker and grittier than that show would typically be. But it's not playing any of the tropes and asking how they would fit into the real world. In fact, it's probably straying a little bit further from the real world because of these elements that are being added. So just because, the most well-known deconstruction shows aren't as cheery doesn't mean that that's what a deconstruction inherently is. So to go back to the Tsundere example.
I would love to, because I actually have a question for you about probably the 2 most popular Tsunderes and how they relate to deconstruction, where you have Asuka, who is, I think according to Mal, she's probably like the second highest, but the highest, like most popular Tsundere of all time is Taiga. Now, is Taiga a deconstruction of like the dairy type? Because we also see the backstory. She has a terrible like life going on. Yeah. She lives by herself. She has no like parental figures, and so she lashes out because that's the only way that she can like kind of relieve herself. I guess I'll put it that way. Is that a deconstruction as well?
Or I would say it was. Now I will say I think that. We know we've talked about Toradora a lot. So this is another interesting thing. So I definitely think Taiga is a deconstruction of a Tsundere, in my opinion. The stuff depends on like trope definitions, so it's going to be different for everyone in some ways. Because I don't think there's like a hard and fast definition of a trope out there. It's not like science. It's like a meter is X long. It's like
funny you say that. Merriam-Webster actually defines a tsundere. I was kidding.
Okay. But yeah, so like with Taiga, we see what would have to happen to make her so violent and reactionary and hot and cold and stuff, right? Like, funnily enough, it's like her relationship with her father, with some other things to go with her, some preconceived notions of her appearance. There's some like Napoleon syndrome in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But where I think that Toradora might fall a little bit short isn't the fact that it ends like happily. It's that it sort of falls back into those tropes towards the end. Like Taiga never stops doing the tsundere baka hitting you thing. So like, I think that it confuses itself a little bit. But I do think the intention was absolutely a tsundere deconstruction, and I think it's a good example of why a deconstruction doesn't need to be like darker and edgier and grittier. I don't think Taiga's relationship with her father, it's not pleasant, but I don't think it's like particularly darker or grittier than things we see in your normal sort of romance drama sort of show. Yeah. You know what I mean? So
when you are done with your dairy, though, I want to touch on the father trope. When you are
let's please.
Would you want to do that right now?
Yeah, let's do it right now.
Okay, so like that's funny that we had 2 common themes of these tsunderes were either like a parental figure or a father figure, and nothing says father figure more in tropes than shown in anime. And I wanted to bring up Hunter x Hunter, spoilers alert if you haven't seen Hunter x Hunter. Miles, I don't think you care. It's not going to spoil a whole lot for you.
Yeah, please
But
spoil.
there's a father figure aspect in Hunter x Hunter, and I wrote this out as an example, and I want to get like Miles' opinion on like what he thinks deconstruction is, because I'm still learning as well. And in Hunter x Hunter, the main character Gon knows that his father is alive. His father is also a hunter. He's a world-renowned hunter, but he's just like a deadbeat dad. He's never been around Gon before, and all Gon wants to do is like have his father's respect. He wants to find his dad and like be like, "Hey, look, I'm a hunter too. Like, will you love me now?" And so at the end of Hunter x Hunter, Gon becomes a hunter. He finds his dad, and his dad's still like, yeah, you're my kid, but I want nothing to do with you, really. I had sex with your mom and you got pregnant and that's what happened. Like, it's cool that you're a hunter now, but could you please stop like following me? And then God never stops because he's just an annoying brat at times. So would that be like a deconstruction of like the shonen father trope? Because it's a lot of times in shonen, like the father figure is dead or gone, and that like what that does essentially is like allows the character to like free roam and do whatever he wants. In this case, it's kind of like that, but like we know the father figure is alive, and his goal is to like get his father's approval. What do you
Yeah,
think about that?
so I think that that's deconstructive of a trope, but I think it's not the trope that you might necessarily be thinking of. Um, so like the the trope of dead dads, that's not a deconstructive of, because that's not like taking a realistic look at um what it's like to have like a dead parent.
Sure.
So something like maybe Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, where the mom is dead and it really affects the characters. Like they also caused the
Yeah.
death, or they had a so like there was a direct thing that they did. That I guess they didn't cause the death, but
They
there was
caused the death, but like they caused the
there
conflict
was some
and
trauma
yeah.
associated there. But um, like you see the negative effect of the absent parents in the two Elric kids, and how it motivates them and how it determines what they would do and all of that, um, throughout the series. So I think like that could be a
Okay.
deconstruction of that. Now back to Hunter x Hunter.
Yeah.
Um, I think there is kind of a trope where, the dad isn't super proud of the son or the daughter or whatever, but then, the kid really like lives up to expectations, tries their hardest and gains the parents' approval, right?
Yeah, because we're kind of
And
seeing
like,
that right now in My Hero, where like Endeavor was like the deadbeat dad. He's trying to like be a better parent and stuff like that, and then you see Shoko or whatever his name is, the fire ice guy, like become like a stronger world class
yeah,
hero, and his dad's kind of like changing with that. Where like in Hunter x Hunter, it's like the exact opposite, where hunters are like make up like 0.000000001% of the population, and if your son was a hunter, you would probably be insanely proud of your son. And in this case, he's just like, no, I want nothing
yeah,
to do with you.
yeah. So I think that's probably like I actually think the My Hero Academia thing is like a reconstruction. Talk about that
Yeah,
later.
yeah, 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 for sure.
But like of the common trope of like son goes on journey to impress father so that um he can finally live up to expectations and the father will love him, and then they do, and the father's like, oh, I'm sorry, but I accept you now. Like it's a deconstruction of that. What is the type of person who would abandon their son, right? Are they the kind of person who would just be so easily swayed by their son's success? No, it's probably someone who had no desire to deal with that,
Yep,
right?
yep.
And then, it sounds like it affects Gon too,
Oh, immensely, yes.
in like ways that aren't positive as well.
Yes.
So, it's probably, instead of just being like a motivational factor, it looks more realistically at what parental abandonment would do to a child. And because it's not even like a death or anything, right? Like the father's just like, peace, I'm out, and that's going to have negative effects on a child growing up. And so, that is oftentimes ignored in these shows where you just need the parents to be gone so that um the kids can go on adventures.
Yeah, and like force themselves into situations and like, well, yeah, like I guess like you just like run free, run wild type of thing. If you have no parental figure who's there to stop you, so then the story can just go wherever it wants to, essentially.
Yeah, you don't need to ask the question, why are their parents letting them do this?
Yeah.
And it's like, because.
Yeah.
You know.
I do have one more thing from Hunter x Hunter that I want to bring up that we're on the topic of Hunter x Hunter. And I now this one I do think is like an actual deconstruction. And it's the character Hisoka. Now Hisoka is one of the strong, he's like, I guess in the story he's probably like a top 10 strongest people in the world. And he's a bad guy. He is a ruthless murderer and everything like that. So he knows he has power and he can do whatever he wants. And instead of like a normal bad guy trope, you have a lot of times you have like the bad guy wants to be the bad guy to have power, money, whatever. In his case, he uses his power to be like a pedophile. And I think you kind of see that in real life with like someone like Jerry Epstein or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
Where these people have the power, the money, what the means to create or to like to make these situations where they know they can, not looking back, not now, but like have the power to do whatever they want and get away with it. And I feel like Hisoka is kind of like a deconstruction because we normally don't see that in anime regardless of genre, where I think a lot of times they want to send like a message. So for example, like someone like Makishima from Psycho-Pass, he wants to change the world. He has like the ability to, like not be scanned or whatever and kind of get away with it. And he has like a real goal. Like he wants to like change society and all this stuff. Like, but Hisoka just like wants to fuck kids. And
so is it a more like hedonistic approach on like villainy, I guess?
Yeah, I guess because like if you truly were like one of the strongest people in the world, like what would you actually do with that power? And if you are a pedophile and you are now like one of the strongest people in the world, you'd probably be a super pedophile. And that's what Hisoka is. And I think that's like it's honestly why he's one of my favorite villains and characters in anime history, is because he's so unique compared to other villains. He's just like, I'm going to dress up as a clown because I can, and I'm going to like harass and assault kids because I can.
Okay.
And what do you think about that?
So I would say like, remember that the trope is like, it depends. What trope do you think is being deconstructed here?
Being a villain, like a very strong villain, not just like a henchman, but like the mob boss.
What I would say is that like there's probably a trope that's like I won't hurt kids or something, right? Where like evil people don't hurt children.
Yeah, like women and children or something.
Yeah. Like I think that's like fairly common. I know that's common in like Western comics and stuff.
Yes.
And I imagine it's also like fairly common in some anime and stuff. What I would say about him being like a pedophile is that it probably like subverts that trope, because like the being a villain and
so just like him not expecting him to be like a pedophile is more of a subversion than like a deconstruction, because we didn't see it coming type of thing.
Yeah, so like a deconstruction would be like if you had a trope. I'm trying to think of like how to fit it exactly, but like
because so let's say like, okay, so villains a lot of times have like tragic backgrounds, or they come from like power, they want to maintain that, and I guess we don't really see that with Hisoka. It's just like the first time we meet him, we see this clown looking dude, and we don't really have like this background to like see why he is the person who he is.
So maybe is he like a Joker type character? Like, is he just evil for being evil because he thinks it's fun? Like, I don't know who he is, so it's a little hard for me to.
So it's more of like, I guess like he definitely like craves power. He wants to like find the strongest people and fight them type of person as well. But at the same time, he like, I guess it's like, it'd be interesting to see like if he was the strongest person in the world, because he's not, but he's like really high up, how that would like change him as a character, because he's always like actively searching for strong people,
Yeah.
and
So
especially in
okay.
kids.
So a lot of a lot of the time, okay, this is what I would say. You have these villains who are like noble in some way, right? Where they're obviously evil and villainous, but they have like a code or something like that, right? They have a task they're trying to complete. Think Thanos, um, think anyone who you end with did nothing wrong, right?
Did
Um,
Makishima do anything wrong?
did Makishima do anything wrong? You
Yeah.
know, so like Makishima is like using his power and influence to attempt to better the world in his own twisted way. So, but like, what is someone really like? So this is how I think it could be a deconstruction. What is someone really like who is willing to go to these lengths? You know, like, would they really be this like noble person who has a code and everything? No, there's someone who loves power so much that they're a pedophile.
Yeah.
You know, like, so I think that there's like a point there that it's like it's deconstructive of the sort of like um type of person who's willing to like go through these machinations that he's going through, um like grand planning sort of thing, like trying to gather the strongest people to do whatever he's trying to do.
Yeah.
um you know, I would need to see the show to see exactly how it fits. I don't think it's like a deconstruction of like villains necessarily, like because I don't think villains is a trope,
Is a
but
trope, sure.
stuff like villains monologuing, or you know, like villains with a code, or
Okay.
you know, stuff like that is a trope, and I think he would probably fit as a deconstruction of like a more specific kind of thing like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. Yeah. I did that now that we talked about it, I definitely feel like it's more of a subversion than an actual deconstruction. But there are like obviously there's some parts, but
Yeah, it is honestly like I think it's like kind of like a scale. You know what I mean? Because like you can ask yourself, how would someone really behave with this power and stuff? Would they have this code, or would they make exceptions for themselves? And like
yeah.
real life shows us that, you know, these like real life villainous people like are super willing to like go to an island and fuck children.
Yeah.
So, you know, Hisoka doing that is probably, at least in some ways, deconstructive of these noble anime villains that we see from time to time, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep, for sure. I was trying to think of like other villains. I guess since we're just on the topic, that would be kind of like that. But Hisoka was just like the first thing that came into my head because he's my favorite villain in anime. So
Yeah. You know, I think that like, um, you know, I don't know, like All for One or something like that, right? Like he's not a villain that um is deconstructing anything. He's like evil because he like likes being evil.
yeah,
Um, you know, and uh, but you know, he's not banging children. So like, you know,
that we
he's not
know
that
of.
evil.
That we know of.
Not that we know of. Yeah. So like, I mean, I don't think My Hero Academia is gonna go there.
There's a 60% chance he's probably banged a kid though.
Oh no, that's it's too high. It's unfortunate.
It's actually 69%. I did the math wrong. Sorry.
Okay, let's not.
Oh, we're not going there. We can't do this anymore. All right, that's fine. All right, let's switch away from the kids.
Yeah, well,
Um,
please.
Is there anything like specific deconstruction thing that you wanted to bring up? I know we briefly touched on Neon Genesis and we touched on My Hunter x Hunter stuff.
Yeah, I think, okay, the best show to think of, like, in the way that the community talks about things for like deconstruction, is ReZero. So ReZero deconstructs a lot of like power isekai tropes. But the way that people talk about ReZero, I don't hear a lot of ReZero as a deconstruction. I don't know if you do, but like,
Bits and pieces, but it's really not like
I don't think it's as prevalent as like Madoka or Evangelion or whatever.
it wasn't even the first isekai that came to my head when I thought of deconstruction.
Grimgar, right?
Grimgar, yeah, that's what came to my head.
So the way that people talk about ReZero, the way that I've often heard it pitched is like, it takes a realistic look of what would happen if an otaku got isekai'd. You know, like that is the ReZero hook for me. That's what I heard a lot of. And I think that like that is sort of how you should view like deconstructions. It's taking a realistic look at trope, thing we do a lot, genre, etc. It doesn't mean darker necessarily. Um, you know, something like I can't think of it. Like what's the um
Give me some hints. I'll help you out.
Log Horizon,
Log
right?
Horizon. Okay.
So, you know, and even like shitty isekai, like High School of the Elite or whatever, like or the
Is that isekai?
no, the High School Elite. Well, I don't know, the one where
Oh,
all the smart people.
the one like the high school. Even in another world, high school prodigies have it easy or something like that.
Yeah, where it's like anyway, things where it like
A
takes
light
a look on
novel.
like
Yeah.
on how like people with advanced economic knowledge and theory would be able to affect a world that is like way behind on theory,
Yep.
um like that's deconstruction, like what would happen with this like normal trope, how would it occur, um if you like really go into examining that.
Yeah.
So it's not always just like this is gritty. It's just a way of looking at something that maybe normally happens, but more realistically.
I guess that's like why Grimgar came to my head, because how I think a lot of times is Log Horizon, ReZero, even like Konosuba, you have characters that are transported into this world who have knowledge of the system that they're in. They're gamers. They understand like RPG elements. They
Yeah, just
understand.
intuitively, right? Like,
Yes, yeah,
and sometimes even better than the people in the world.
yes, and a lot of times it's like they're not even like I don't know. It's really interesting to see how like you get transferred to this world and like you understand it within half an episode of what is happening, and you're like, this is my life now. And why Grimgar comes to my mind is the people that get transported in Grimgar have no knowledge of these RPG elements, or they're not gamers. They're very shocked of the world that they're in. They one second they're in their life, the next second they're in a completely other fantasy style world, and now they have to work together to survive, and they're scared, they're traumatized, they don't trust each other. They have all these
Yeah,
different elements of what would happen if you actually got teleported into another world, because I would probably lose my shit. And
exactly.
that's what happens in Grimgar. They're like crying because they're scared. They don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Another Grimgar one is when the cleric dies.
Yeah, like the I guess at
Yeah.
the time he's kind of presented as the main character.
He's like the leader at least of the group.
Yes.
Um and so like we see that like really affect the characters, and it affects them going forward, and they make decisions on that based off of his death forever. A lot of the time in anime and other media, but we're talking about anime here, like fantasy, isekai and stuff, if there is a permanent death, it doesn't always carry that weight um in a super realistic way. People have noble deaths, um and they're like, oh, like we'll use this to
Yeah.
get better, and like it continues, and they don't get mentioned a ton, and you don't
Or
see people grieving, you don't see people, like for like a week later, you know what I mean, like
yeah, and even
episodes later.
in fantasy, like the idea of death isn't permanent. Like especially like isekai, it's like if you die in so many different elements, they're able to come back, whether it's through a resurrection spell, whether it's through collecting dragon balls or something like that. Like the idea of permanent death is like never there. And then in Grimgar it is, and it's always there. It's always lingering for the cast.
So you saying that is interesting, um because like that in itself isn't deconstructive, because those are like
No.
two different
Yes.
tropes. But
Yes.
something like how the respawning effect in Log Horizon,
Yep.
it might be like deconstructive. Well, what would happen if you could like return? Like, would it take a toll on you? Would it affect your memory? Like would you lose part of yourself coming back?
Yes. Like
And
if
so
you,
like
you like yeah, you experienced, if there say there was an afterlife, if you say you died, you experienced an afterlife, and then all of a sudden you came back into the real world. Like
yeah,
how would you, what if that afterlife was dope as fuck? Like and now
yeah, that's an
you're
interesting
and
thing.
now you're back working at Aldi. Like
That's a great way to view, like, that's a great deconstruction potential, right? Like having someone come back, but like um it's traumatic for whatever reason because there's like an afterlife. If you have like what is coming back from like this post world, like um you know uh not that that's like exactly realistic because we don't know if there's an
yeah,
afterlife, but like
exactly.
within the confines of a world where there is one,
You
we
can
can
create
imagine
it.
that that could
Yes.
be. And Kazuma has like a little bit of that. It's played for laughs. I don't really think it's deconstructive, but like
No.
where he
No.
wants, he's like upset that he gets brought back because he can't hang out with Eris anymore. So
Yeah, he's like, I was having such a good time. Why did you have to resurrect me? And they have their conflicts. That's good. But do you want to talk about Konosuba at all, by any chance?
yeah. So I think Konosuba's cool. I think it definitely has some deconstructive elements. I think that it's like uh, primarily like a parody and also a love letter to isekai.
Yeah.
Um, but things like how they have to work at the beginning village for so long, and they have to scrounge around for partners and stuff. It's sort of like a deconstruction of that um, fantasy isekai RPG trope where you go in and you're immediately off to the races. Um, in Konosuba, we have like the first 2 seasons, and they're in the starter town for like most of it. They go on a
Yeah.
vacation once,
Yep.
but they don't really go adventuring. Like, they go to the cave, which is right outside town. They go to the fields, which are right outside town. They go to the next town over. um, but they like uh, they're very centered around that opening hub, and that is, I think, a more realistic take on like how living in another world would be. You don't just immediately start going off on your adventure. You need to train and prepare and all of that sort of stuff. So I
Yeah.
think that's pretty good.
That is good. That being said, since Konosuba is mostly like a parody, I also agree that it's mostly a parody. Do we want to talk about like the differences between like deconstruction and parody and stuff like One Punch Man, where is especially just the anime, because I know the manga kind of like diverts itself off of the tropes in season one, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that'd
So
be fun to
like,
talk about.
I think like when with parody, you're taking a trope and you're like playing it up like to its maximum potential, right? So you have like Saitama, you have the overpowered protagonist. What is us taking that to the most insane extreme, right? And you have Saitama. You have someone who can kill people in one punch. That's all it takes. All he has to do is punch you and you're dead. Um, you know, where like a deconstruction would probably be more similar to like a Watchmen character or like
Yeah, for
Homelander
sure.
from The Boys, where
Yeah,
you're taking this overpowered person and like, well, what does having this level of responsibility and power like actually play out like in reality, as opposed to like taking the trope, not caring if it's realistic, just like playing it up. So like, in Konosuba, you have the um oh, this is an interesting thing we can talk about real quick. But you have like Megamine, who's like
sure.
the um, kind of I guess she's not a, what's the word? Um, you
Exploding
hate
Girl,
Yeah, Chinibyo, sort
Chinubi.
of like, but like you have like the power obsessed wizard sort of thing that like really loves their magic, and you like play that up to 1,000. Um, do you think darkness is a bit of a deconstruction? I'm wondering about this because like, is it a realistic explanation for why someone would be like a noble paladin, or like is it just Like, I don't think so.
They just
But
love
like,
pain and they love
well,
being.
that's the thing. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, like what someone who does things like this would have to be a masochist. Like, but it's also played up so like a lot, right? Like she's like really a
Yeah,
masochist.
like
Like
yeah.
I have a friend who like is or she's a
Oh yeah, go
yeah
on, tell
yeah.
us. Yes.
No, okay, I have a friend who's a masochist.
Oh,
And
what's her name?
she gets super. I'm not
Is
gonna
she
say.
single?
She is.
Will she be at the
Um,
wedding?
no.
Damn
Um,
it.
and like she gets like actually annoyed at Darkness's portrayal, um, because of how like over the top it is, and like how much of like a parody it is and everything. So like, I don't know. I think that's like pretty funny. This is a
Yeah.
little side thing, but like I think that it sort of shows like the blurred lines because there's like a little bit of deconstruction like there, like someone who's willing to put their body on the line like that has to be a bit of a masochist. Like that's a like a more realistic explanation of the sort of like selfless hero trope, right? But then it takes that and like parodizes it by making it go to 100,
Yeah, no
so
pain, no gain. Yeah.
I think that sort of shows how these things like aren't super clear cut and can like build into each other, and it's just our like these things aren't real. They're things that we're trying to use to like analyze commonalities between media. So
For sure. Well, yeah. I thought I see a lot of like similarities between parody and deconstruction a lot of times, especially when I was doing some research. And a lot of people were saying this is a deconstruction. No, this is a parody. No, this is a subversion. So
yeah, I said the story before, but I'll say it now. So I was like looking it up. There's this website, and it like has this thing called not a deconstruction, and so in it quotes a video. So I go to the video before I read the article, and it talks about how Monica is not a deconstruction, and it gives its reasons, explains what a deconstruction is, yada yada yada. Go back to the article, read it. Go to their definition of deconstruction, and Monica's listed as like a prime example.
I saw that. Yes,
yeah,
I saw that today. Yeah, and it's like a deconstruction, and they list like each character, and like how each character is a deconstruction. I'm like, this is really like counterintuitive. Like, what is going on with your website?
So like the same, yeah. So like but it's like it's tough because like at the end of Monica, like it's very reconstructive because at the end of the day, the power of friendship wins and solves the problems, right? And the selfless wish like does the thing and like helps the people, and then Rebellion comes out.
Yeah.
But like, but like, so the same show can like deconstruct things and then reconstruct things. And a reconstruction, because I know we haven't defined this yet, is like when you take a trope that's been deconstructed and then you piece it back together as the title says, in order to make it work in reality. So like,
did you want to use Endeavor as the example since we already talked about it?
We did talk about that. So like, I think Endeavor, it takes like he's like the bad dad who like doesn't care, right? And like that gets deconstructed, or whatever. But like, so Todoroki has this like bad relationship with him, but Endeavor wants to like be back in his life or something, but like he has to work to do it and change, and so it's showing how this like father son like get together that we see when like son does well, earns affection of father or whatever, can actually work like in reality. Like sure, you have some bad blood, you negatively have affected your child, but if you're willing to actively change yourself and put in the effort and all of that, you can accomplish what that trope was originally sort of setting out to demonstrate, right? So I don't know. At some point I get like a little confused in all of this,
Sure.
to tell you the truth.
It's a lot.
But like, yeah, but like, when you have like, say you have like a superhero, and people like to deconstruct superheroes a lot. God, they love to deconstruct superheroes. So if you have a character and you start examining, what is the psyche of someone like Batman like? What is um someone with this much power and influence and extrajudicial whatever, and you like look into all of that, and then you piece it back together and say like, yes, these are like flaws, this person isn't perfect, but the pursuit of justice is worth it because of like X, Y, and Z. You've like reconstructed that trope, right?
Sure.
So like
Yes.
when you say like, yes, I acknowledge the not the realism that you have presented with your deconstruction, but my end result is the same as the original trope and not as your deconstruction.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, it's pretty cool, right? Like,
It is, yeah, absolutely.
So, it's just like a neat way to like think about media and stuff, because it lets us relate things to each other in like a cool way, so.
Well, I think that's a really good point, and I know we brought up a lot about different types of anime that, like, I thought was deconstruction and in terms of specific genres. So I kind of touched that with Shonen and Hunter x Hunter. We kind of did that with like Grimgar and ReZero with Isekais. Yeah, so I have another example for you, and tell me what you think about this. It's deconstruction in terms of the romance genre, especially the harem genre. So there is a show called Clannad and Clannad After Story, and how I view it as a deconstruction of harems specifically, but I'll just say like harem romance. So how Clannad deconstructs itself, where we have two very important things in harem. One is the chase, and then two is the group of like the girls in this case. So how Clannad After Story kind of does it is, not only does the main character pick a girl and choose her, and they have a relationship, and the other girls have to sit back and watch the relationship take place. The chase is also done because you see the after story aspect of them not only staying together but getting married and having a child, which is very, very different from what we see in anime, especially in romance, because a lot of times it's, if it is in a harem situation, we never get the answer that we are looking for. This is I should say specifically in anime. In manga, a lot of times the story is finished. You know the end result. A lot of times in harem and anime, we'll get a season or two, and it's go by the manga. So that's why I think this is more of like a deconstruction in anime, because we see the whole story take place, and then it's not always like sunshine and butterflies that harems a lot of times, or at least romance, turn out to be, especially when you have that relationship. A lot of times the drama is very little to like almost zero. It's just them and having like a fun relationship. Where an after story, not only does Nagisa, the mom, die, but the child also passes away. So we have this completely different. Yeah, it's insane. So in your eyes, would that be a deconstruction? Because like, to me, I can see like that kind of happening in like real life as well, where a cool popular dude has like 4 girls and he actually picks one, and then shit happens.
Sure. So like, I would say no. I would say this just like, it maybe is like more subvertive. So like,
okay, well, yeah, if it's not deconstruction, what would that be?
Yeah, I would guess it's like, so like in a harem, you normally don't expect to see the level of commitment that you're presenting in after story, right? So, like a lot of the times there's like a girl is chosen, right? But it's sort of a bit ambiguous. It's ambiguous enough that like the ships don't sink for the other girls, But it sounds like an after story. He just like picks a girl, and then like after story is the tale of him with that girl.
Yes, yeah.
And do the other characters sort of just, they're not romantically interested anymore?
One kind of has like that always like what if factor, I guess I'll put it that way. But like the characters like don't go away. I guess like one of the characters becomes like their daughter's like preschool teacher, so like she's not completely like written out of the story either. So
yeah, but they're not like and the way that like DXD, like Rias and Issei get together, but like also everyone else is still kind
Yeah,
of,
in the
like it's not
race,
like
yeah.
that, right?
No,
Um,
no, they are a loving family with a child.
okay, so like the reason I don't think that that's like a harem deconstruction, right, is because getting together with one girl is not a harem trope. It's the opposite of a harem trope.
Yeah.
So it's like a genre switch or a subversion or
Okay.
something. So, you know, like a harem deconstruction, which sucks. And this is an example of why deconstruction doesn't mean a show is good. It's like School Days, right? Um, what kind of guy?
That's like picking a girl, but also picking other girls while you pick the girl.
So like, a guy who has this harem. What kind of guy is he? Well, he kind of sucks. What happens when the girls find out about all the other girls? They kill each other, right? Like that's not honestly that realistic. Like it kind of loses itself there, but like that's what it's
It
trying
has
to do.
happened.
It has happened. That is so true. um, so we're Clanad After Story, or Clanad and Clanad After Story. I think it sets up a harem, but then it sort of subverts your expectations by end up being like a just a romance between two people, right? It
Yeah.
ends up being it's not monotheistic, monogamous. That's it.
That's it.
And so like what it would need to be doing to deconstruct harem would to be still doing a harem trope, but in a way that's like more realistic. Like how would this like girlfriend maybe? I haven't seen it. I've only had this explained to me, right?
Oh
But
god, this show sucks ass. Yeah.
This might be another example of how like deconstructions can suck. But like,
Yeah.
in order to be in a polyamorous relationship, from my understanding, communication is like super duper important. Like more so than like a normal relationship because you have like a lot of people. And so my understanding of like harem shows are normally like guy just attracts women and everyone's cool with it and that just that's just how it is. There isn't like a group discussion about this or whatever. But in girlfriend, right, he like talks to the girl he's dating about bringing in this other girl.
Yep.
And like they have like a realistic ish, I don't know, I haven't seen the show.
Yeah, I would not say realistic, but I guess I see what you're saying. It's a it's a harem where like they are like an actual harem. Like they're in.
There's an attempt for communication.
Yeah.
And I think it probably more closely mimics how like poly relationships happen in real life.
They animate it, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
Like I don't think it's gonna be like I mean it's girlfriend, but like I think it's like trying to make a more realistic version of like a harem show, and so that is maybe a bit deconstructive.
Yeah,
because it's examining those tropes and trying to like explain them better.
Yeah, it's because it's not like you said DXC before, where like he chose Rias, but like if he like kind of like did whatever with like another girl, it's like it's fine. Like it's not where this is just like they're in like a committed relationship with multiple people, and that's like kind of like how it. Yeah, okay, I get it a little bit more. Okay.
Yeah.
Very
so like
confusing.
I think the important thing to remember about deconstruction is that like what you're deconstructing has to be the same trope as like the deconstructive scene, kind of.
Yeah.
So like anything where like for example Tsunderes and Asuka, right? They're both Tsunderes, but one is taking a more realistic approach and trying to break down that trope and understand how it would work.
Yes.
In reality.
They're not just a tsundere to be a tsundere. There's like a backstory to it.
Yeah, there's like an attempt to explain why the trope is there. Whereas like we normally expect this, but this happened, right? Like with Clonad After Story is like subversion. A very unpopular example of like subverting expectations would be like The Last Jedi, um, where
Oh yeah.
um, right, and I actually love The Last Jedi. Don't
Yeah,
tell
you
anyone.
would. Yeah, you would. Miles
Well,
is canceled.
I love 2/3 of it. The whole casino bit. Yikes. But like you expect the heroes to save the day, they get betrayed, and they lose, right? You expect Rey's parents to matter, and I guess they do because they didn't storyboard all 3 movies before they wrote them because they suck. But they don't, you know.
But they don't.
You expect Luke to be this like heroic Jedi monk guy. Well, he's been beaten down by life, right? Like that's all subversive. It's not what you're expecting at all. But it's not taking a trope and like making it more realistic. It's just playing around with your expectations.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that's all I had from my examples. Did you have anything that you wanted to bring up on your that you want to talk about in terms of like deconstruction or anything along the lines of that?
Yeah, I think I would just like, like my last thing is like deconstruction is a cool way to like look at things in the sense that like it's a tool that things use so you can like, notice that like certain tropes are being deconstructed and think about like, why this has been chosen to be done. A deconstruction doesn't mean a show is better or deeper or anything like that, I really like these sort of like more meta commentary shows and stuff, and myself included, but like the community of people like me who like these sort of shows tend to get a little full of ourselves sometimes. And I think it's important to remember to not to take things on its own merits and think about the themes that deconstruction or symbolism or juxtaposition or whatever might be trying to highlight, as opposed to just like this does deconstruction. That's in and of itself of merit. That's not
Yeah.
true. Yeah. So, I personally don't like looking at genre deconstructions. Some people do. I think that what a genre is a little too hard to define in my own personal taste. It's too shifty and evolves over time. I can't always take things in the context of when they were written. So I just like to look at individual tropes. You know, but there's a lot of ways that you can look at this. And if you want to discuss this, Discord's below.
Wow,
There's a link below.
Great plug. And I think you made a really good point at the end of that. Is more of like discussing the deconstruction and the tropes in the show itself, rather than the show itself being like an actual deconstruction of X genre, unless we're talking something like very specific.
Yeah, like Evangelion isn't good because it deconstructs tsunderes. Evangelion is good because it really delves into like the psyche of these children and what it means to be a human, and part of the way that it does that is by deconstructing tsunderes, right? So, just it's a bit of a buzzword, but like I would love if we could reel it back in and try to take a more holistic approach of how we look at stuff.
Absolutely. I think this was a great conversation. I learned some stuff because I've said it before and I will say it again. I am really bad at this type of thing. If it wasn't for math, I wouldn't have gotten into college. So if I had to write a paper on what deconstruction was, I think you could tell during this episode, I probably would have got like a C minus.
But I think I think you're using it how you've heard it, right? People talk about Madoka being a deconstruction, but then they talk about things like mommy dying or whatever, or the girls becoming witches or something like that.
Yeah, because like it's magical girls, they're cute, so death is a deconstruction where that's not the case.
That's like a subversion of your expectations, and there are deconstructions in there, but like it's Madoka isn't just a deconstruction, like it's a magical girl show that deconstructs some of the tropes, reconstructs some of the tropes, plays some of them straight, and then does a bunch of other things, So, I think that it's important to use the words correctly so that they don't like lose their meaning.
Words mean things, yes.
Yeah. And
context matters.
I think it would help us, like, as a community, be able to talk about things more. You know, when I started looking into this a while ago, I was like super surprised to see like how many examples of deconstruction a show like Naruto has. You know what I mean? Because like, you know, I came in with the same like deconstruction is like this like quote unquote lofty like art piece thing, and that's not what it is, and it doesn't need to be that. And you know, it can be super cool to talk about how shows like Dragon Ball Z or Naruto or whatever deconstruct things too. It doesn't need to just be, you know, fucking Tatami Galaxy or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Can't wait for the sequel though for that one.
oh god, I'm so excited.
Yeah,
you have to watch. You have to watch the movie.
I will watch the movie.
The movie is so good.
I probably got a year before the show comes out, so it's all good.
The movie is like an hour and 30 minutes, Pete. I've read 5 volumes of Berserk. Watch the movie.
You've read 5 volumes of Berserk? Wow. Okay, well, in that case, then I'll watch everything that you ever want me to watch.
5, they're big volumes.
they're huge. Yeah, the Eclipse is great. Watch Berserk, read Berserk. Ooh, Deconstruction of Berserk would be fun. But that being said,
there's a lot of it.
I bet there's a shit ton in there. That being said, that's going to conclude our episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you are interested in talking deconstruction, anime, manga, video games, sports, politics, who cares? Anything. Join our Discord. It's in the description below. If you're watching us on like YouTube, you should leave a comment what your favorite version of deconstruction is in anime that you enjoy, or manga, or something that I could talk to you about. If you want to support the podcast, the best way to do so is like, comment, subscribe, leave a rating, whatever platform you're listening on is by far the best way to support us. I don't need your money. I just need your likes, please. Thank you so much. In a week, we will be watching Afro Samurai for Watch Club.
Yeah.
It is a bi-weekly group discussion on anime that we vote on in Afro Samurai 1. So if you are interested in that, you can see us in a week. But other than that, thank you so much for watching or listening wherever you are, and we will see you next time.